see me?
I can see you.
Great. Okay. I'm
And
ready
that
to
looks
take
better than
notes.
some of the in between. So,
Okay. I'm ready to take
okay,
notes and get
first
to work.
question. What happens to the chemsex addicts who opt out of recovery and try to manage the addiction on their own? Hmm. Okay. And are they ever successful? Are there statistics as to what percentage die versus what percentage eventually hit rock bottom and get help?
Well, let me just say this. We run a drug and sex program as well as a pure sex program because these two groups of men have very similar problems. And oftentimes you might think, oh, they have a drug problem, but really they have a drug and sex problem. And a lot of these folks, even when they do go see a counselor or a group or a therapist, they usually only focus on the drugs. And the problem is that people who do meth and sex, coke and sex, alcohol and sex, they have sex problems. And so you can get someone sober on the drugs, but they may not necessarily be able to stay sober because the sex leaves them back to the people who have the drugs, and then they're using drugs again. But to your question, first of all, I have a colleague who works on our team. His name is Dr. David Fawcett. He is there particularly on our team to work with men who have meth problems. He wrote a book called Lust, Men, and
Men
Meth.
and meth. Mhm.
Lust, Men, which Tammy can put in the chat. And we hand it out to all our clients, and Dr. Fawcett meets with our clients. If you wanted to talk to him, you could have a consultation with him. But I think I'm really the sex guy. I think if you want to talk to the drug and sex guy, you have to reach out to Dr. Fawcett through us. But let me just say this. Meth is one of the hardest, if the not hardest drug to recover from. And let me tell you why. There are a lot of drugs that we try to help people get off of, like alcohol or opiates. And when they are trying to get off, as you know, people go through withdrawal. And so we have lots of drugs and medications and processes by which we can get somebody clean and sober and stable for long periods of time from drugs like that. But when someone is abusing speed, especially meth, we don't have any way to mitigate. They're going to be depressed, they're going to be miserable, they're going to be unhappy for a long time, because when you blow out the dopamine receptors in your brain, they don't come back right away. And so the problem with sobriety from meth is that people who use a lot of meth and then try to get sober, they're kind of miserable, and they're miserable for a long time. And we don't have any medications or processes to make them feel better. The only thing that will help them feel better is time. And most of them get to the point where they're like, screw this, I felt miserable for so long, I just want to use again. So the problem with meth addicts is that their withdrawal is so intolerable to them, and the way they've been living has been so disconnected from real life that it's very hard for them to stay sober. And I'm trying to make this shirt work. I just can't make it quite work.
Just
And the other thing,
relax. You look great.
thank you. The other thing, I've been running today. The other thing is that I think if you have a meth problem, you need a lot of sober support around you. This is really not one you can do on your own. So I'll say that meth addicts I won't answer all your questions, but I will tell you that meth addicts without question have the highest level of relapse of any other drug. And that is because they're so miserable without it. And that is because meth doesn't just pass through the brain and get you high, it destroys some of the brain cells because it's such a large problematic molecule. So you will be unhappy for a long time. That unhappiness will drive you back to sex or some kind of acting out. You're going to end up getting sober. So I think the lessons that are needed, the work that is needed, this is why we run an intensive residential program, because we want to deal with the sexual issues underneath as well as the presenting drug problems. And I think you need a really good program to do that. Let me say one more thing about that, Tammy. What I'm hoping will evolve in the addiction world is more sophisticated programming. We've worked in this field long enough to understand that people have drug and sex problems. I just talked to a gentleman today who has sex and eating problems, and he has a work problem. So, these things kind of go together. And I think if you're in a drug and alcohol problem, you might not get treated for the other issues if you're in an eating disorders program. So I like the idea, I like what we're doing, which is putting pieces together that, for example, women relationships and alcohol. I know so many women who relapse over their drinking. And so they're never going to get sober for a long period of time while they have real relationship problems. So you kind of have to deal with both. And I think the addiction field is getting more and more attuned to focusing on multiple issues at the same time. Otherwise, it's very hard to keep people sober.
And I want to I want to address the manage the addiction on their own. I've been around, as we say in AA, a few 24 hours. I've been around here, and the people that try to manage the addiction on their own don't manage it. I mean, oh, it drives me crazy because, recovery is completely different. Us doing stuff on our own is how we got to the doors of AA or whatever program it is in the first place. We think we can do this on our own, or if we just do whatever, a different way, like people who don't have issues with this stuff don't spend any time wondering, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Whatever. They just live their life. They drink or they don't drink. They have sex with somebody or they don't. They just don't deal with this kind
They
of
have
stuff. So
choice.
they have choice. Yeah, you're right. We can choose, but I love statistics, but I was sitting here going, and which category, like if it was just 50-50, which I don't think it is, but if it was just 50-50, which side would you put yourself in? At the end of the day, I remember when I was in treatment, and this was a long time ago, but I had the luxury of going to treatment. It would save my bacon, but the one of the therapists said, there was 20 of us sitting around, and she said, odds are only one of you will make it. Now, I think things have improved a lot. I think there's been a lot of that, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I hope it's me, and it, fortunately, thus far for today, it has remained that. But, like just putting yourself in a category or what are the odds and all of that kind of stuff, it doesn't take into consideration that this is a problem that is underlying issues that, with good help, you can address. Okay.
And let me say one more thing about that. I believe that all addictions have at their root challenges with intimacy, relationships, and connection, because that is one of our core drives, if you will, in being humans, is to pair bond, to build families, to build communities. And those of us who are addicts tend to run away from families, communities, and nurturing environments toward our addiction. And the problem is it's really hard, almost impossible to do this by yourself. In fact, I would say it is, because the very problem is about disconnection. And in order to get well, you have to be connected. And if you're disconnected to your drug dealer and your friends, and that ain't going to do it. You need people connected who will tell you the truth. Let me say one more thing, Tim. I have to say it. I was on a consultation. I do maybe 2 or 3 a week or something. I don't do as many as I don't have that much time, but I try to. And, I was talking to this gentleman who's like, I've tried this and I've tried that and I've tried this, but he actually hadn't tried sitting in a room with other people. And even all the individual therapy he didn't really get him where he needed to go, because he wasn't being held accountable. He was just getting support. And I need people who will call me on my crap. And I just want to say, after this consultation I did with this gentleman, and I pushed and prodded and pushed and prodded. And I said to him, I was very upfront with you and I really pushed you about what your issues are. How do you feel about that? Never met him before. I only do consultations once. And he said to me, I really appreciate the honesty. It was so important to me that you just told me the truth, the naked truth, even though I didn't want to hear it, because that gives me a foundation to move from. And he couldn't have done that on his own. He needed someone to reflect all of that off of. So anyway, no, the answer is no. Go
That's
ahead,
the short
Tammy.
version. Okay. Thank you for all you guys do. Is there a place for secrets in a relationship where there is no partner betrayal or sex addiction? That is, in an otherwise healthy relationship, but where one or both partners hold on to secrets, especially from prior relationships. Is there a problem with keeping such secrets? Can you contrast that with a couple who has experienced betrayal?
I'm not sure what the question is, but if you want to
So
refine that.
if you have no addiction, no sex addiction, and you're
Right.
just two normal people and you don't tell all, you know, compare that to somebody who has struggled with betrayal,
Okay.
you know.
So I've done some magazine. I actually remember some magazines calling me about this. God, must have been 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And the question was very similar. The question was, it's a women's magazine, I think. When would it be okay to have no reason to access my partner's Facebook account, Instagram account? Is there a reason why I would ever want all those passwords? Or is it appropriate in a committed relationship where we have trust to let this person do whatever they want? And my answer is, of course, it's appropriate for we get to have a private life. And what I chat about with my friends from high school, or what I talk about with my, friend I went to school. I mean, it's really none of your business. And I might actually be talking about how problems in my marriage, but I get to talk about that with a good friend. When we have trust with each other, it means you're not suspect about what I'm doing when I go out the door. You know where I'm going. When I get online, you trust me, or I'll tell you what I'm doing. So there's no reason for you to have every single access to my content because that's mine and it is private. However, if I have cheated on you, if I have let you down, if you have if you have chapter and verse on how I have hurt our relationship, not past relationships, then all the whole thing is off. You get to have every password, everything, because now you don't trust me at all. And if you've lost trust in me, then that gives you the right to figure out what the heck I'm doing so you can decide whether you want to live with me or not. So, by the way, trust is the backbone of our relationships. Just want to say that trust is the honest belief that you, of all people, would always have my back. You, of all people, would never let me down. You, of all people, would never go out in the world and actually do things that you know would hurt me, and you did them anyway. That's where trust gets broken, because now I can, if you've cheated and betrayed, and I can't, when you leave the door, I don't know where you're going. You say you're doing this, but I don't believe you. When you're on the phone or texting, are you really doing that in a healthy way? When I have broken trust, then all bets are off. I wrote a book about this called Out of the Doghouse, a cheating man's guide to saving his relationship. And it is because a lot of men don't understand the things they have to do to rebuild trust and to regain something that they didn't even know they had. But boy, when you lose trust, you know it's gone.
Okay, next question. My SA husband just told me being in our marriage makes his sex addiction worse. The only way it could be true would be if I constantly triggered him or caused him stress. However, being with me is amazing as I am super sweet and accommodating and fun to be around. Of course you are. Please help me understand this logic. Is this pure denial or blame shifting?
Well, I'm
That's
looking at
a
the question
great
myself.
question. I love it.
Oh, Tammy, you might have deleted that question.
No,
You
no, no, I did
probably,
not delete it. I think it
I
was
want to
because it was
see.
on already before you came on.
Oh,
So
okay.
my SA husband just told me being in our marriage makes his sex addiction worse.
Right.
The only way it could be
So,
true would be if I constantly triggered him or caused him stress.
so I'll just say the same thing that I say on this issue, and I can't say it enough times. So all you spouses, I don't know how many people are on here. Let's see. There are 54 of you. So if 30 of you are spouses, I want you to not only hear this, I want you to write it down. Write this down. If you're the spouse of a sex love addict or spouse of an alcoholic, there is nothing I can do. There is nothing I could have done to make this person act out. There is nothing I have done. There's nothing I could have done to make this person act out. You understand, spouses, you can make someone miserable. You can, if I'm your spouse, you can gain a whole bunch of weight and I'm not attracted to you anymore. You can spend all the time with the kids and I feel lonely. You can take a vacation without me and I'll be frustrated and angry. But none of those things means that I have to go have sex with other people. None of those things mean I have to go drinking and partying. If I'm unhappy in my relationship, I can take up a new hobby. I can start to focus more on my kids. I can get a divorce. I mean, there are a lot of things, or marriage counseling. The choice to drink or use or act out sexually or gamble or any of that is my response to my unhappiness. But there are, no matter how miserable you make me, and you may make me very miserable, I have every choice in the world other than this one. If I go have an affair, if I go look at porn, if I go fool around and I blame you, you're right. It is me externalizing the problem onto someone else that makes me feel entitled. Oh, she doesn't give me this and she doesn't give me that. Look at all I do for the family. So I deserve to be able to go out and do this. And entitlement is a big piece of what my clients need to learn to put down.
Okay, so next question. Hi, Dr. Rob and Tammy. Due to the pandemic, I am working from home. I do have content filters on my computer, but on my work computer, not everything is filtered. I do know that it is not smart to search porn on a work network, but it still triggers me knowing that pictures are a click away. How do I accept this just until we go back into the office?
Well, So there was something there on all the filters are not set on my
The
work
filters are on
computer.
his home computer, but they're not all on his work computer. It's like, oh, it's just a click away.
Well, it's always a click away. Trust me. You probably have a phone. It may not have devices. Your friends may have phones. Your wife may have a computer. So, the idea that I'm vulnerable here doesn't mean that I may end up acting out. It means I have to put extra care into how I'm handling that situation. So when I'm working on that computer, let's say I'm doing it for 6 hours, I might call a friend, a sponsor, or a therapist and say, hey, it's 9 a.m. I'm getting on this computer. I commit to you that I will not look at anything. If I do, I'll call you right away. And I'll call you when I'm done doing my work on this computer. Someone was asking earlier, can I recover alone? No, because this is the very kind of accountability that we need. Left to my own devices, I'm going to click that click. But if I have a commitment to someone else that I'm going to check in, I have some responsibility and it's all open and clear, well, it's much less likely because it's not just about me letting myself down. It's also about my word with someone else. And I'm not talking about spouses. I'm talking about when you're really trying to work on this. It's not that you're not accountable to your spouse. That's different. This is being accountable to someone to begin to break through the patterns of behavior. Accountability to spouses is more about honesty and telling the truth. Different process. Tammy, do you have anything else you would add to that?
No, I really agree with that. I think, I'm going to get on the computer and I'm going to be accountable. This is the kind of stuff that gets caught and then you lose your job and all that. But as with everything with addiction, the negative consequences, until they all of a sudden happen, aren't enough of a deterrent. So having the accountability partner, and you being an accountability partner for somebody else, I mean, like both directions is really good, because then you're also being of service as well.
We have this great exercise, Tammy, that we used to use in treatment. I haven't used it in a long time. It'd be perfect for this situation. So what I would assign you to do is to write a blog about if you saw this happening. So let's say you saw a blog online, maybe I wrote it, about people who are struggling with sex addiction. And what you saw on the blog was, so this is what I would write to this. So this is, if I were you, this is what I would do. Man, put your name in, man caught looking at porn in the workplace. As a result, like a blog, as a result, this and this happened. And then these people found out, and just give yourself a real good look at what the consequences are. Because, and here's another piece to help you. And Tammy, I know we'll get this. As addicts, what we often think about is the thing we want to do. The sex, the gambling, the gaming, and we get all focused on that and we're so excited and we're really laser focused on that. But what we forget about always is after. How am I going to feel right after? How am I going to feel going home? How am I going to feel worrying for the next week and a half if IT at work was going to find this? So I think, yeah, absolutely accountability. And by the way, Tammy's right. The fear of the consequences will not keep us sober, but understanding and, look, every time you want to act out, you can pull up that piece of paper and say, oh, right, that's what's going to happen after. Just that reminder can be helpful. Some people, by the way, put pictures of their kids around the computer. They have constantly having a picture of a spouse, not because those are the people who are responsible for their sobriety, but those are the people who remind us why we're doing this in the moment where we don't want to. Lots of
Yes.
ways to work on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned we're always laser focused on what we perceive we're giving up, but we're not focused on all of the things that we're getting. When we talk about the outer circle and the middle circle and inner circle, everybody's like, I can't do, and it's this big negative of like, the inner circle, but they're not going, all of these things in the outer circle are the great things for me, and they're meaningful to me. And like you said, the pictures of the family, the whatever, your picture of your dog, whatever is meaningful to you.
Can I say something about that,
Yeah.
Tammy? Because it has to do again with this consultation I did. So I know when I have a sex or love addict on the phone, on the wire, because I asked this question. Oops, I'm hearing a little repeat here. I asked this question that they never like. I say, what do you do for fun? What do you do for recreation? Well, I do a lot of work, blah, blah. No, no, no. What do you do for fun? Well, when I go to meetings out of town, no, no, no. What do you do? Well, I like to go to the gym. What do you do for fun with other people? I have sex. So your main form of entertainment is not playing ball, not going, hanging out with people like cars, not going to, museums, or working out, or going to with people, or going to get your favorite way of escape is to escape sexually. And that's really what Tammy's talking about when she says outer circle. What she means is we have a boundary in recovery about what kind of sex we're not going to have. But there's another boundary, which is what are the things in life that we can find joy in, because we've been so focused on the sex and drugs that we forgot or never knew that there's a world of things out there that can make us happy, that would distract us, not with the same intensity as our addiction, but a little drip here and a little drip there. And before you know it, you're having a reasonably happy life. Yeah. Any thoughts, Tammy?
I agree. Next question. When do you know a man has a sex addiction or just looking for hookups and affairs?
So you've heard me answer this before, maybe. And Tammy, I'm not sure if your earbuds are working because it sounds like you're talking differently than you were before. But maybe they're just out of juice or something. So people who have affairs, well, men who have affairs in particular, I have a word for them. They're assholes, basically. If you have an affair with someone outside your relationship and you were committed to that relationship being monogamous, then basically what you've done when you go act out and have the affair or go to the sex work or whatever it is you're saying in those moments, my agreement with my spouse, my boundary, my commitment is not as important as what I want to go do. And this goes back to something a colleague of ours, Stan Tatkin, said, and I did a whole podcast about this. By the way, we have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. We have another one with Tammy and I on it called
Betrayal.
No, we can't hear you now.
Oh, really? I'll take these out. I'll disconnect. But anyway.
I think you're out of juice is what you're out of.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay. So it's overcoming betrayal and addiction. And I'll put that in the chat.
So if you want to hear more of what Tammy and I chat about here, we decided that since it's confidential and since we do this every week, we took 100 of these shows and we edited out anything that was personal and we put them online because it seems that people really seem to learn from all these questions being asked. And the other thing I have online, which is Sex, Love, and Addiction, we have over 500,000 downloads. That's a lot of people. And I have, thanks to Tammy, we've been able to rope in some amazing therapists and advisors and spiritual people, all dealing with addiction and intimacy and sexuality and spiritual, just all that wonderful stuff related to recovery, couples. We just did a podcast and I know they're going to want to hear it. It's called Restoring Sexuality After Betrayal. And I hear that all the time. Well, we've been together and working on this. How do we consider going back to sex? Or I'm afraid. There's a wonderful book, a couple of colleagues of mine, their name is the Burkhaws, and they did a whole thing called sexual integration therapy, which is really about reintegrating sex when trust has been broken and you don't trust it. You're afraid. And we did a great podcast. Again, the podcast is Sex, Love, and Addiction. And you'll find that there for sure.
So I want to go back to the question too. I put some stuff in the chat, but and you said, then you're an asshole. And the problem with being an asshole is
I didn't finish the question.
Not a whole lot of help for that. There is help if you are struggling with compulsive behaviors. And sometimes, it's labels. It's like, at the end of the day, if it's problematic, if it's keeping you from being in a healthy attachment relationship, if it's hurting your partners, Dr. Rob was talking about, you don't want to be that guy. He was doing a consultation and he was like, you don't want to be that guy, so do you want to be that guy, that asshole? So.
Well, I want to say something more about that because I got lost in the other things. So what I mean by asshole, let me just clarify, excuse my language, is it means that as a beloved, connected partner, I have decided to go out in the world and do something that I want to do, that I know would hurt my spouse, but I'm doing it because I want to do it. And that's just shitty behavior, to say, I don't give a crap of what they say, I'm going to go do this anyway. It doesn't have to be an addiction. But as our friend Stan Tatkin said, and that's what brought up the podcast, because a colleague of mine who wrote a book called We Do, great book on marriage. He said, you know, a good relationship on both sides means that when either member of the couple makes a decision, like I'm going to go to a sex club, they don't think, what do I want? The first thing they think is, and if you guys want to have good relationships, here's the best way to do it. When I'm making any decision in my life that's meaningful, like not get a donut, but something meaningful, is this good for my relationship is the first question I ask. Not is it good for me, not is it good for you, but is it good for us? And I find that that is a guiding light, especially for addicts, and people who cheat. So the asshole, if you will, is the person who doesn't keep the person that they love in their mind when they go out in the world. I'll give you an example. Tammy knows this, I love to shop. And although there's not as much to shop for, but when I used to go out and shop more and I would go in the clothing section, I would look at things for me, but I'd always have in my head, I wonder what my husband would like. I wonder if he'd look good in that. I wonder if this would be a nice gift for him, which means that even though I was going to the store and out in the world, separate, alone, I kept this person in mind. And I think that our partners being in mind at all times on some level is really, really healthy. And our choosing to make decisions that would be right for both of us and not just for me.
Okay. So next question, are there certain temptations on laptops and phones we just cannot avoid and have to accept? For example, on my iPhone, there's a search option where you can search anything, even if the phone is restricted. It is small, blurry, blah, blah, blah. But the only way I've found to get these searches to go away is to get a new phone. Is there an instance where I can just accept it and try to keep myself busy?
Tammy, do you want to start this one?
Oh,
I've
this
done so
feels a
much
lot like
talking
the
tonight.
accountability as well. You know, like one of my addictions is alcohol. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. If I want to go get it, it's, you know, like I can get it. You know, another one is food. Guess what? There's food 6 steps away from me right now. You know, I had to learn to have a different relationship with things. Going back to what I said earlier, if you're always focused on I can't, rather than here's what I can do instead. I can have an accountability person. I'm, you know, like if you're checking in with your sponsor or your peer every day, beginning of the day and at the end of the day, that stuff just goes, it's more likely to just not be that big of a deal. The other thing is if you're constantly stressed and, you know, then you're more likely, you know, in 12 steps, we talk about hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And I also said stressed, you know, so I need to take care of myself on all levels to make sure that I've got more bandwidth so that those things are not always tempting me. But in our world, everything is everywhere. I mean, so learning to manage through that and just focus on other things instead of always focusing on no, I can't, no, I can't, no, I can't, you know, which feels like deprivation. That doesn't go well. So
Yeah, I want to build on what you said, Tammy, because I remember years and years and years ago when I was first learning about all this, someone talked about the concept of healthy pleasures. And I thought, you know, if I want to act out, I don't have to just grip the chair, call a friend, say no, you know, put my head between my knees and, you know, ask and pray. I mean, those are good things, but I could also go for a walk. I could also ask a friend for lunch. I could also, well, lately I've been doing words with friends and stuff, so I can just play a game with someone or watch a movie. It doesn't matter. I can interrupt those moments and they will pass. And Tammy's right. You know, we have to live our lives. We can't just blind ourselves to anything that might be a temptation. We have to learn to live with it. And learning to live with it, I think, means not just not doing it, but what are you going to do when you feel like doing it? Because obviously there's something going on inside of you. How are you going to make a connection or calm yourself down or, you know, make yourself feel better? I mean, we want to act out because we want to escape what we're feeling. I think it's fine to escape what you're feeling by watching a movie. I think it's fine to escape what you're not. We don't need to feel every single feeling. But if our default is to go act out, then we just feel worse and worse. Yeah, what else we got? Oh, by the way, if you guys don't know, Tammy is answering questions about books and some of the things that you want to know about in the chat. So if any of you are looking for, oh, what was that book or whatever, it usually ends up there. You can find it.
yes. Okay, next question. The lying, and I hear this all the time. To the face, how in the world is this something so easy for an addict? What is their gain? It's so confusing.
Well, we lie because we want to get away with what we want to get away with. If I told you, look, I said, this is funny. I used to say this when I did private practice. I don't think I've said this at our treatment center, but I say something like, you know what? I have no problem with your seeing sex workers. You can go every day. All you need to do is tell your wife or husband in the morning before you leave. And if they say it's okay, then it's okay. And none of the men or women I ever worked with said, that's a good idea. I'm going to ask my wife or husband, because they knew the answer they would get. So when somebody wants to do something more than they want to face the possible consequences, or a no, if I tell you what I'm going to do, I'm probably going to get a no, and I don't want that no. I want to do what I want to do. So I lie to you about it. And then when you say, well, where were you? What you were doing? I'm going to lie about that. And then when you say, well, you seem really distant, or is something on your mind? I'm going to lie about that. And I'm going to lie, lie, lie. I'm going to lie so I can go do what I want. I'm going to lie so I can protect what I've been doing. And unfortunately, what that does to you as spouses, we have a word called gaslighting, where you start to believe up is down, red is green. I'll say, I never said I was going to be home at 6:30, but of course I did. I never said I was going to pick up groceries. Why are you always bugging me? I'm not talking to ex-girlfriends. I mean, this constant blowback when a spouse asks me something, or a partner, and I just completely distract them, there's really bad negative consequences to you spouses. You begin to doubt yourselves. You begin to doubt your intuition. You will believe us before you believe ourselves. And that can be pretty devastating for you. Yeah. Anything else about that, Tammy?
Well, we in active addiction lie to ourselves as well as everybody else, that we're doing this because I don't want to hurt you, Rob. So I'm going to lie to you,
Right.
So like we're lying, or we're really believing that we're, today I'm going to go to the grocery store because I told you I was going to go to the grocery store, but then I didn't do it, and I don't want to feel bad, so I'm going to tell you, no, I never said that. So all of that is, part of the cycle. And even stopping the behavior, the acting out behavior, what we hear, I've been subbing in on the partner meetings a lot, is they go, and I've been on the female groups, and he's still lying. He lies about everything. So part of the Out of the Doghouse book that Dr. Rob put in there about rebuilding trust is also learning to tell the truth. And as our clinical director says, tell the truth and tell it faster. So, okay, next question. When is it a good idea to start dating in recovery? I have seen some good sobriety. I have seen some good sobriety, and I have been having desires to date, but I don't want to date too early since I know some of the things in recovery will take longer.
Okay, well, I have some answers to this. And I think I wrote about this, not to push books, but in Sex Addiction 101, I think there's a section on how do you begin to date, for the single folks. So first thing is, if you're a sex addict or have an eating disorder, if it's something like Tammy said you need to continue to do and you have to set a plan around it, then you probably have some kind of sobriety plan. For people with eating disorders, it might be, I don't go to the buffet, I don't eat between meals, I don't eat sugar, have your own, depending on the person. And if you're a sex addict, you also have, I don't go to sex workers, I don't look at porn, all of that. Now I forgot the question, Tammy. There's something I wanted to say
Dating.
about
How
that.
do you know when it's
Oh,
time to date in recovery?
okay. So if you're going to have a plan for sex, you probably should have a plan for dating, because the step up truly from sex addiction is love addiction. In other words, as a sex addict, I'm objectifying body parts. I love that butt. I love those boobs. I want to be touching. I'm going to be important, especially if they want me. But the next step up is using people as objects, not just body parts. So then it's like, I love them for what they give me. I love them for what they do for me, but I don't necessarily see the person as they are. So I think the first thing you have to do when you start dating is make a plan. Uh, how often can I date? How long can I date before I have sex? What do I say to people that I'm dating? What kind of people is it not okay for me to date? What people is it okay for me to date? And then you don't make a single decision around dating unless you run it by, and this is the other piece you need, a group of men or women who are in recovery who will tell you the truth. I told you I talked to a guy today and I said all kinds of challenging things to him. And he said, what I really appreciated as hard as that was you told me the truth. And finding people who will tell the truth for us is not easy. Most people want to look good, not disappoint someone. But in recovery, we understand that the truth will save someone's life. So having people around you who will say, you can't date that person, they're married and they have a drug addiction. When you're saying, oh, but they're so cute and they really like me, but you don't really see them. So I'll just say it in this way. if you're a sex or love addict, you probably don't make the best decisions around sex and dating. So I say, why bother? Ask other people that you trust who will support you, who have no agenda, not a spouse, but someone in recovery. Do you think I should go on this date? Do you think I'm ready to have sex with this person? Is this based on how we experienced each other last time? Do you think I should see them again? I never went on a date without calling my sponsor and asking. And then when I got done with the date, I would explain the whole thing. And the men I was involved with, they would tell me if I could have another date or not. Because I don't always see clearly on these things. And so this is part of the thing about you can't get well by yourself. I often distort things. I think this is this when it's really that. I think that's part of being an addict is you kind of lie to yourself. And I need other people out there, which is denial, by the way, lying to yourself. And I need other people out there to say, I think you're kind of full of crap there. Sounds exciting, but to me, that would be a bad thing to do. And so dating is not done without a plan. It's not done without a group of people who will support you. And it's not done until you are willing to make a commitment to reaching out to those people before you date, after you date, during the dates.
Okay, next question. And so what are childhood attachment wounds that leads to sex addiction in someone who suffered from childhood neglect? Troy Love did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction. I would highly recommend you listen to that. He also does every fourth Wednesday of the month, he does a webinar, and he talks about this a lot. And so I would encourage you to do that. But do you have thoughts on this specifically too?
Yeah, I'm looking for a book. Hold on.
And Enid Gray did a book called Neglect, Silent Abuser. That's a really good book on looking at neglect, abandonment, all of those issues as well. So
we have a colleague by the name of Dr. Jamie Marich, M-A-I-R. You can spell it better than me,
yes, I
Tammy.
will. I'll put it in the chat.
And Dr. Jamie is very much a trauma-focused person. And she just wrote, I don't know if you saw it, she wrote a One Day at a Time for trauma survivors and a book called The 12 Steps to Surviving Trauma, or
surviving 12 trauma in the 12 steps. So
surviving trauma in the 12 steps. She did 3 things. She did a book, she did a daily reader, and she did a workbook. And I think if you want to look at trauma from a recovery perspective, that's a really good thing to look at. Here's the bottom line. If you didn't learn the consistency of love and nurturing, you're going to struggle with love and nurturing in your adult life. A lot of the people that I work with think they're a piece of shit, think they're terrible, think they're horrible people. I just see them because of the things they've done, the people they've hurt. And I look at the people I work with as being very broken people who never learned the lessons that they needed to learn about kindness, empathy, continuation of a relationship. They didn't see it in their role models, and no one taught it to them. Listen, I had a mentally ill mom, and she was mentally ill my whole life. She went in the hospital when I was 2. So the idea for me that people would consistently nurture me, focus on me, make me come first, that wasn't my experience in childhood. And I learned how to take care of other people. I learned how to read the room to see what was going on with everyone, to make sure that I could not run into danger. But the one thing I didn't learn was what happens if I feel safe and adored and comfortable in a relationship when I learn to trust others. Children who are not consistently responded to in a healthy way, and I mean consistently, because of neglect, because of abuse, because of violence, because of mental illness or addiction, they don't learn about consistent connections to people in adult life. I learned about short periods of intensity where I could disappear into like some fantasy and make myself feel better, as most addicts do. Why? I learned about it because I never learned about the comfort and support that other people could offer. I never learned that in early life. By the time I was a teenager, there was drugs and sex and all kinds of ways that I learned I could make myself feel better in the absence of having to turn to an attachment, a relationship. Because you see, if I turn to drugs, alcohol, and sex, they'll never disappoint me, never let me down. I may feel bad after, but they're never going to reject me. They're never going to let me down. They're never going to argue with me. They're never going to not meet my needs because there's a result. But if I go to an intimate relationship and I ask for what I want, that means I could get hurt. You might let me down. You might disappoint me. You may not be able to be there. And if you grew up like I did, you don't ever want to feel that again. You don't ever want to feel that someone who loves and adores you just doesn't have time. And so the easier way of having control over how I get my needs met is not turning to people, because I never really learned that turning to people was consistent. It's more turning to things that I can control, like drugs and sex and alcohol and eating, because I know that those will make me feel better. And I'm not sure that people will. By the way, I agree with Tammy really quick. One of the most profound experiences that we struggle with is neglect. And neglect can take many forms. It doesn't mean you didn't have food on the table, or you didn't go to a nice school, or it means that there wasn't time for you. It means you weren't a focus. It means that you were not important in the family. And you know what? The truth is, I've worked with people who've been neglected, and I've worked with people who were hit. And I have to say that the people who were smacked around by a parent, well, let me say it this way. The people who were in group with me who said, I wish I was the one who had a parent who hit me. And you think, why is that? And they say, because neglect is so amorphous. It's so like, it's the absence of something. The absence of love that you never got is very hard to understand. When you got whacked around, you know what that was. So finding your way through neglect is a very difficult thing to understand. And I agree, Enid's book is really, really good. Um, the bottom line about sex addicts is that we learn to, and addicts, period, we learn in the absence of soothing, comforting relationships that are focused on us when we are young. We learn to soothe ourselves and refocus ourselves to make ourselves feel better on our own. And that may help us survive an empty childhood by having a place to go in our heads to feel better, but it does not bode well for an intimate adult relationship when things get difficult, we run away because that's all we know how to do. That was a long answer. Did I
That
answer
was,
the
it was
question?
very,
Okay,
I,
thank
I,
you.
I loved it. So, and I put some things in the chat, but Jamie Marich and Enid Gray both did podcasts with, guess who, Dr. Rob Weiss, on sex, love, and addiction. So, they have books, they have lots of resources, but also just go listen to the podcast. They're all free. So, okay. Should
Can
I
I say
continue?
one thing before we move on? Sorry. I just, I want to do a little bit of advertising. I'm very proud of the hard work that I've done over these years, and writing 10, 12 books, running and opening a bunch of treatment centers. We found out this week that my Psychology Today blog has 18 million readers, 18 million readers. And a podcast we started a year and a half ago on a whim has over 500,000. So I know that the work we're doing, and it's all free, right? Podcasts, blogs, and the stuff on our site where people get free help. I know that that's working because so many people are engaging. And the reason we did all this for free, by the way, is that we wanted people who did not have access to resources, did not be able to, maybe they couldn't afford therapy, maybe couldn't afford a treatment center, maybe they didn't know how to reach someone like me. We wanted to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to at least begin to understand getting well. We do these online courses that are pretty inexpensive because this is information you don't get outside of a treatment center. You don't even get it in therapy because therapists aren't often teaching. But the bottom line is, and I want to just say very honestly, 90% of what we do is free. The other 10% of what we do is run a treatment center called Seeking Integrity here in Los Angeles. It's not particularly expensive. I think it's some of the best work I've ever created. And the reason I mention that to you and the way we operate is very simple. If 5 or 10% of you go to our treatment center for help, we treat men with sex and drug problems, sex addiction and sex and drug problems. If 5 or 10% of you come to treatment with us, it pays for the 90% of the free work that we get to do, more blogs, more podcasts, all of that. And I kind of love that model because we're sitting here for free. I mean, it's our time, but we get to give it away in the hopes that you'll get what you need. And one or two of you will say, well, gosh darn it, that's where I want to go get help. And, we will be glad to do that for you. So that's my plug for today.
Agree. And I want people to get help. We kind of started with that, is I feel bad for people who never, ever, ever get the help that they need. And so live in the, in the same, you talked about it on a previous webinar, that people that come to our treatment program can, that now the world is in color. It isn't just in the shadows and black and white. And that's what I think I feel bad about, is that somebody's always living a half life. So we've got lots of questions.
Well, I want to say that really too, is that a friend of mine have done this. One of the people who taught me how to do this work, as he was leaving his career, I said, what do you think we've done over all these years? And he said, I think we turn boys into men. And I really, really believe that we take people who are very focused on themselves and don't understand the meaning of connection and are just me, want, and we turn them into people who finally understand they're not the only ones on the planet. And if they want to maintain their relationships, they have to work for them and work on being a healthy member of their family.
Next question. Should I consider going on a sex fast, in quotes? I'm a recovering SA and I want to do a sexual reset with my partner. I want to spend that time doing meditation, exercising, journaling, confronting my childhood trauma, and building real intimacy with my partner as a prelude to having healthy sex with a partner. Is there a minimum period of celibacy time that you suggest?
So I didn't get the beginning. I heard sex bath, and I'm thinking that
No,
isn't what
sex
she meant.
fast, like fasting.
Okay,
Like,
so in other words, you're taking a time out from sex.
correct.
And can you tell me more about the situation? Because I
It,
don't, are they
all it says
married?
is
Are they,
I'm a recovering SA and want to do a sexual reset with my partner. I want to spend that time doing meditation, exercising, journaling, confronting my childhood trauma, and building a real intimacy with my partner as a prelude to healthy sex with my partner. Is there a minimum amount of time? But it doesn't say how long this person has been in
it's
recovery for
okay.
SA. So, yeah.
So I understand the concept of the idea of reset. I want to just say that some people think your brain resets in 90 days without sex, or, there's no research about that. There is no reset. To me, it's more about a slow series of changes that happen over time. So, for example, I'm glad you said the part about regaining intimacy, but it was very shallow. Like you talked about I want to do this for me and this for me and this for my recovery and this for my trauma. But I don't know that, have you given much thought to what regaining intimacy is? Because if I was trying to regain intimacy with a spouse that didn't trust me, number one, I'd be showing up for dinner on time. I'd be helping with the family. I'd be doing all the things that you're supposed to do to be a decent spouse. And in addition to that, I guess, let me just think one more thing that I want to say about that. Um, oh, developing intimacy. Intimacy is not sex. There can be sexual intimacy, but there's all kinds of intimacy. I've had intimate friends for 30 years that know everything about me. We're very, very intimate. But to restore romantic intimacy, I think has to do with going back to the beginning, holding hands, going out on dates, maybe discussing the heavy stuff with a therapist instead of just the two of you. Um, Maybe massages. I think that you have to slowly move back into, and by the way, feelings might come up. If your spouse is traumatized, you might be giving them a massage and then you move towards something and then they say, whoa, that scared me, or that reminded me what you did with that other person. You stop, you move back. You don't have what you had before. And you can't just get there by saying, okay, let's restore intimacy. You have to take little teeny steps over time. And one of the first ones, by the way, is stopping acting out, getting into therapy, doing a disclosure, putting everything on the table so things are even between the two of you. And then you can begin to move forward.
And I was thinking the sexual reintegration. I have not heard that podcast yet, but that might be another one to listen
It
to.
just came out. It's really good.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, I haven't listened to it yet, but I'm thinking that is probably very much step by step. So I know the cause. So
It does. It actually talks about all of that. That's true.
great. Okay. Dr. Rob, after years of avoiding sex with me, my husband started therapy for other reasons to tell me he was diagnosed as a sex addict, almost level 2 due to porn. He also said he was furious with me for withholding sex from him, which was untrue. He never told me anything more and over time insisted that it was no longer an issue. His mental health improved greatly, so I stayed. Is it possible for someone diagnosed as a sex addict to recover without expert help or programs?
Well, just because someone calls themselves an addict doesn't mean they are. I think that's something that requires a diagnosis. So someone who's fooled around some or lied or cheated, I don't know what their issues are. It could be addiction. It might not be addiction. Sometimes I say I'm an addict to get my spouse off my back. It's really a problem. It's not me, it's the problem. So, I'm not sure. I don't have enough real information to answer that question, but I will say that um, why would he be furious with you for, you're not withholding sex. You're not feeling comfortable having sex. You're choosing to not be sexual. You don't feel safe. And I understand from your perspective you didn't do that, but that can be a big justification for me if I want to go act out. Oh, she doesn't want to have sex with me, and therefore I'm going to go do what I want. Um, but he never told me anything more. I guess I would ask, what happened to that sex addiction problem that you said you have? When have you had sex with someone else? I mean, addicts are not going to be forthcoming about what we've done, even if you ask us, but our problems do not disappear. So either they've gone underground and he's doing something else like eating or drinking, or because addiction is kind of like whack-a-mole, one goes down, another one comes up, or it may well be, that he is still lying to you. And just because someone has learned to look better in their relationship, which makes you feel more comfortable, doesn't mean that they're not still acting out and keeping secrets from you. I think you have to ask.
So next question. My essay husband said being in the marriage makes him feel locked down in an environment with rules, which perpetuates his addiction. How does that environment force him to use? So frustrating. I go back to what you said before, and I put it in the chat. There's nothing you can do or that you could have done that would have made him act out. So this feels like the blame shifting, gaslighting, etc. Thoughts, Dr. Rob?
Well, first of all, I wrote a book called Pro Dependence, and it's about, I've worked with so many partners who went into therapy, went into recovery, started looking at themselves, and all of a sudden everyone told them, well, you got to look at what's wrong with you. Why did you pick this person? Why did you stay with this person? And I think that's all a bunch of crap. We stay with people because we love them. We pick them because we care about them. We hang out there because we want to see them get better. And that doesn't have to be examined. What needs to be examined is the person with a problem. And those of us who've been there for that person, we need support. We need nurturing. We need guidance. We don't need to be challenged or picked apart. So I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I think this is a man who does not like having accountability and responsibility. And it's like a little kid. That's what this makes me think of. What do you mean I'm not old enough to drive the car? What do you mean I can't go in the kitchen and have some cookies whenever I want to? You're a terrible mom. You never get, listen to this. You're a terrible mom because you never let me do the things I want. That's what I hear here. This is not an adult speaking to you as an adult. This is a person who's trying to get you to feel bad so they can go do whatever they want. And honestly, the first thought that, I hate to say this, Tammy, but when I heard this question read, the first answer I thought of was, why is this person still living with you? Why would you put up with any of this unless you still think that it has something to do with you? And it doesn't. And by the way, I was talking to a woman the other day about her issues with her husband. And I thought we were going to talk about sexual acting out, but then she talked about how he put her down, how he would throw things and scare her, how he would call her bad names. And all of a sudden I realized this wasn't just about him putting her down so he could go act out and feel justified. He was actively abusive. And that when someone says, I feel locked down in this marriage and trapped, and you're just trying to set healthy boundaries, that's abusive. Let's go on more. Tammy, more questions.
You talk about discovery, but it is increasingly difficult these days given privacy of smartphones and apps. I discovered very suspicious information by snooping through my spouse's extremely personal trauma therapy workbook. I have never confronted him given it was his deeply personal private material. He's denied any bad behavior when confronted based on other suspicions. What advice would you give me about as the spouse?
So do you think that the spouse was looking through his trauma book and found about acting out that he hasn't told her yet?
Yes. And
okay,
when confronted with it, denied it.
well, what I would do is pick up his trauma workbook and I would hand it to him and I'd say, I read this whole thing. And you may say, and of course, this is when, by the way, addicts try to really make the waters murky. How could you look at my private things? That's personal. Don't you know how private? You know what? When you have been acting out, all bets, like I said, when we very started, you don't get to keep secrets. You don't get to keep your passwords online. If I want you to trust me again, my whole life is an open book. And there is nothing going on with me that I'm not open to sharing with you. I don't want to tell you what went on in my 12-step meeting because that's not about me. I don't want to tell you what went on in my therapy group because that's other people too, except for my own experience. But as far as what's going on in our home, between us, there are no secrets. And believe me, if you do not trust this man enough to have gone into something that is very private and personal, then you kind of know that you're being lied to. And guess what? You found it. So instead of being afraid of him being upset that you found it, when that line comes out, I would say, excuse me, I don't care where you put this. I don't care how private you thought it was. You've been lying and cheating on me, and don't distract from that. Later on, we can talk about how it is that I felt so unsafe that I ended up going through some of your private things, because I don't like doing that. But you left me feeling so unsafe, so mistrusting, and so not knowing what was going on, that in order to make myself sane, I had to look around and try to figure out what was going on. And I have every right to do that, because it's my relationship too. That's how I would handle it. I would shove back hard on what you're going to get, which is, that was private. You're not supposed to look through that and all that crap. When the person's not lying, when they're being trustworthy, when they're being consistent, then it is none of your business.
So there's so many good questions yet.
I know, but dinner time.
I know we're out of time, and we've got another meeting that starts in 5 minutes.
Yes. So folks, two
come
things.
back next week, please.
Not just next week, but on intherooms.com. Every Friday night, I do the same thing at 6 o'clock. You know, Tam, we got 191 people this week. So lots of folks are listening. And don't forget about my podcast with Tammy, because it's really, you know, if you like what we're doing here, again, free, but there's a lot of answers to questions that are hard to find elsewhere. And besides,
all of that is on sexandrelationshiphealing.com for those of you that are listening to this on the audio. I did put it in the chat as well. So, but do come back.
We're kind of fun together, aren't we, Tammy?
We do. Somebody commented that they had first experienced us watching a video or something, and they were commenting positively on our interaction. But I do love working with you. It's great. So,
and just so everyone knows, we're married to different people. We live in separate states, but we really are good friends and love doing the work together. So absolutely. I'm going to go now, eat dinner. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Take care.